mid-month of May 2023. Hey, it's MikeRatner.com doing Mike'sMastermind.com. Here we go. People was saying, hey, you hadn't posted in a while. That is true. Although I have two other recordings that are on my phone. This is actually my handheld Sony pocket-held recorder. I haven't used it in a while because I've just been recording off the phone because it's an Android and I get it on the Google recording and I can send it a couple different ways as an MP3 or a link. This will have to download and then upload. So it's okay though. But here's the quandary, just to kick things off. We're going to talk about the WeltSchloss. Don't worry about it. This is what it's about. Because someone had emailed me and in the email said, hey, I really liked your talk on the WeltSchloss, which if you don't know or not following me or don't know what's going on, it's my German word that stands for world dwelling. And that we're talking ontologically speaking. So in a philosophy, in the way of our being in the world as we conceive it, what's the quality of our dwelling? And also it technically means we are existing in something that we're building. So something that's already built in the world. You could say the artificial environment as a contrast against our nature. How are we ultra being present? So it's a very polite email, very supportive. It's, hey, I loved your talk on the WeltSchloss. Where is the website? Now, I had to stop for a moment, and this is not the first time that someone's asked me for it. They spelled WeltSchloss correctly. WeltSchloss.com. So I just had to say it, just add the .com to the word. And if that's too complicated, you can just go to my overall presentation of my understanding of my own pseudo-philosophy, and that is at where my writings can be found, sort of a sampling of things here at grandtourideas.com, grandtourideas.com. And again, these talks can be found at mikesmastermind.com. Okay, that's just sort of the setup for things. So anyway, I thought, all right, well, maybe I need to read a little bit about what I wrote. Now, of course, it's very dense with references because I'm contrasting ideas, my original thoughts, against things that are already existing out there, and I'm pulling them from different sources. There are lots of different sources, but they're referenced. And because other people have compiled different ideas, it's easy for me to find out there. There's so many great books. Stanford has got their Encyclopedia of Philosophy online. Google Books, man, you can pretty much just, if you can like a particular philosopher or you heard of a particular title, you can either find it through thrift books, a used version, and sometimes they even post, you can click into it and read whole chapters. And the same thing with Google Books. So it's quite a bit there. And then, Wikipedia and just on and on. There's different places in the academic Google searches that you can find. And people have their papers online, and theses and dissertations. So there's quite a bit out there, which is very fortunate, And so eventually I will put these up into Wikipedia. That was the goal. But right now I'm just still working on the writings per se, and though I will continue to build out and condense them, and you'll find them again at grandtourideas.com, and there are links there that then go out to the different writings that I've got, which is kind of interesting because I've been wanting to do this for a long time, never really quite thought of myself as a writer or a neo-philosopher, but here I am. This has been quite productive for the last 6 months. I pondered about doing this last summer and finally got into action, and really, I've delivered the goods. Haven't officially published yet. I don't have a Kindle or a paperback or anything or a hardcover or any kind of text or, real something you could hold in your hand per se, other than if it's on a Kindle book reader. But you can find, again, different references here. So on the WeltSchloss for my buddy who wants to hear me talk about my writing. And again, I appreciate it. There is some interest out there. People kind of give a gander, give some thought about it. That's what it's all about. So again, as we begin here, WeltSchloss is my term for what I describe as a reality reckoning. I'm spelling reckoning with the W in front of the R. Because in this interpretation, we are being attuned to what is perceived as reality, and there could be agreement. And if you follow my other writing about morbology, the MORB, is those that, they're probably living a great life in the way that they're living it, but they're operating what I call as their MO. The modus operandi, the MORB, is the way to get along in life through rational behavior. And that rationality and that behavior might be geared to just simply getting along and getting by, or there could be something that's unseen in that universe that's one's intention. We'll talk a little bit about the Baidek, which I reference in Theory of Mind in a moment. But the idea of the reckoning is that we sort of no longer tell ourselves stories about things or projecting this identity that I call the I-go instead of the ego, the I-go in my imagination. That's basically the selfie of the mind, but this personality that's out there. Now, it's important to look at this or examine this, have a sense of this in the WeltSchloss because we're talking about the world we're dwelling in. So if most of us in a morbid type manifestation, or I call entification, where we become this entity because we put an identity, an ID into it. An ID, there's a lot of acronyms. ID simply to me is internal dialogue. This ID is internal dialogue that the morb is other than aware of, or at the very least, really not putting the center of attention on its own effects. So therefore, it's living in this ego projection. This identity of internal dialogue that says what it is based on what it's perceiving itself to be and what they consider, or it considers, what other people are thinking about them. And it gets processed through this Baidek that I'll talk about. So in this reality reckoning, we need to become a bit more attuned to this internal dialogue. And I look at this as the flight we take every day is TWA, thoughts, words, and actions. And as we become a bit more attuned to this, how we're piloting our life, we become a bit more aware of our thoughts, the words we're using, how we're acting, how we're showing up. And this becomes a little bit, less of the identification of things that are considered out there, this internal dialogue, because now I'm paying more attention to that. I have less of it. I'm more attuned to this, which is a bit more of the pristine moment of silence, being a bit more in the gap, the razor's edge, whatever you call it. The fine line to where I'm not taking sides, I'm not necessarily stuck in my opinion or having to be right or proving you wrong. I've given it up. Now, there might be things I'm curious about and would like to have a better understanding. That's okay. And I do so with the premise of permission. And I'm not going to go in there and invade someone's space or kind of be where I'm not welcome. And that can be challenging because sometimes you want to get in there. But they're not ready or they're not willing. They don't want it. You got to respect it. Otherwise, it's karma. Well, you're just going to have to deal with a negative, reckoning. So the reckoning is how we're being present to things. And the best way, as Guy Finley would say, is letting it go. Or Krishnamurti, the observer being observed. That yourself is sort of in contrast to, what is this self? Now, self-liberation, which I also talk about, is the letting go, right, of this identity. So it's less of an identity crisis because you're naturally attuned to this inner being. And in reflection, the WeltSchloss, the world that we're dwelling in, becomes less of a burden, less of Atlas having to carry the weight of the world, up the hill and having it roll back down because you lost it. It's okay to lose it, but do you have to keep picking it up again? 5-second rule, leave it there. Okay. All right. Okay. So this idea of reckoning is really sort of the idea that we're able to elegantly wreck the old paradigm. It's a separate talk that is sort of prismatic, that through a prism, like you could say plastic or glass that reflects into the light, we have a spectrum. And we're all in the spectrum somewhere, right? We can't be pointing out to just one or two or a group and say this or that because, you're caught into what I describe as the mass trance. That your brain or mind has been co-opted and thinking thoughts that have been given to you that you haven't really reflected upon to sort of go, I'm just part of this composite. And the reflection might not even be right? Someone could be really sincere about their idea, but they're sincerely wrong. So how do we tune and deal with this? Well, the whole concept of the WeltSchloss, this idea that we are in the world, we ought to examine the quality of our dwelling, how we're being in the world. And I talk about ultra-being, an excellent example of enlightenment as we get this, so you become a way shower for others. And in turn, you practice this. It's a practice of being present for yourself. You're able to make your way into this world and have a finer sense of dwelling in it. Yes, it doesn't mean that we no longer care, We want to have compassion. But yet we have to be able to step back so we can be enabled to be empowered. If we're going to make a difference, it has to be through your excellent example. This is enlightenment, at least if you're going to define it, to be a way shower, right? The light at the end of the tunnel is to practice this sense of ultra being. And you get to define it, what this is for yourself. This reality reckoning, the qualities that you want to imbue and have and be for others. Okay. All right. So anyway, this writing is I went quite long in the first paragraph in WeltSchloss.com. But anyway, again, you can find the link if you can't spell it through grandtourideas.com. And I have links on there as well for the podcast version. In fact, the same day I created the term, when I talked about it, that link is there. I'm going to kind of conclude here, but just to say that this idea of WeltSchloss came from the wider German word Erschlossenheit. And I ain't going to spell that one, like I've said before, but it is in that document of WeltSchloss. Now, in Schlossenheit, so Erschlossenheit, which has the Schloss in it, literally means revealing, development, and comprehension. Now, that's really quite interesting, if not impactful, because we do not have a word like that in the English language, Erschlossenheit. Some people are going to say, thank God. It's a very long word. And there are even longer German philosophical words, right? We're familiar with Zeitgeist, right? Spirit of the time, and there's other ones out there. But Erschlossenheit is revealing of development and comprehension. That means as things are developing, they're revealing. I have some sense of comprehension. To me, that means I'm duly awake. I'm fully present. Now, there could be different levels of this comprehension that then has a revealing onto itself. That's what inspired me to go, oh, well, how can that contrast into how I'm being present and this world that I've constructed through your TWA, the flight you take every day, with your thoughts, right, the things you're talking about, the words you use, the quality of which, and of your actions, how you're showing up, your act. So I thought it relates to the philosophy term world disclosure, how the world is interpreted and itself as observed and studied discloses, right? Sociologists study, right? The world, right? Societies. Psychologists study people's minds. So as things are learned or revealed onto themselves, there's a greater understanding and perhaps appreciation of it. So in that way, Erschlossenheit refers to how things become intelligible and in that way meaningful, relevant to us as human beings. And I relate it to it by virtue of our being, that we are part of an ontological world in which we are finding our place in the world, understanding the quality of our own way of living, how we define our own way of being by lifestyle or personality or by career, right? These are all different roles and identities we play out into. But there's behind each title or participation aspect, there is a sense of feeling and how we relate to either how well we're doing, but more so in the backdrop, how we're being as a person. So if we're being this way in the world, we can understand that we're participating in a world that's already created on some level for us, right? Because it's constructed, right? Whether you're driving down the street with a car, right? You know how to drive that car. You've got a license. You may encounter a stop sign or street lights. You know what red and green mean. And you know how to put on the turn signal. You know which direction to go. Or you know how to turn on the GPS and find your way in the world. So in this way, we're kind of relating to the Erschlossenheit, how things become intelligible and meaning and relevant to us by our being a part of it. What are we contributing to? What are we voting for with our dollars by the things that we talk about to others? So as things become revealing in this way, I thought, well, we can go a little bit deeper by us examining the WeltSchloss. I just put together those two words, the world and the slosh, which I kind of like because they're sloshing around. And the German word for world is Welt. I think about W-E-L-T, but I think about being welded because here we are. All right. Now, in my BIDEC writing, so it's BIDECK.masstrance.com, and again, links through grandtourideas.com. You can find some of this there. The BIDEC is referring to theory of mind, which is we're processing a phenomenological conjuring up, and phenomenology is basically a study of phenomenon. And the phenomenon down to the wire is, here I am. I'm showing up. And that's a phenomenon. As things happen, as we look at incidents or just the way that we're moving and being in the world and how we interpret how things show up for us, we're having a philosophical ontological